Okay, our next talk is by Curtis McCully, and we'll be hearing about more real-time observatory coordination.
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name is Curtis McCully. I'm at Las Cumbres Observatory. I'm an astrodata scientist there, but I'm also the product manager at CIMA. And so I'm going to tell you about one of the things that we've been developing that we've called Heroic, that's actually going to tie really well into some of the discussion points that have been happening about, how do you coordinate these different observations when you're at the scale of LSST. So first of all, we love our backronyms. And so we have Heroic, and what that stands for is the HOP-enabled Real-Time Observatory Information and Coordination System. At least it's all the first letter, right? That's got to count for something. So Andy just talked quite a bit about HOP, and so I'm going to tell you a little bit about one of the systems we built on top of that. A lot of this actually started with Treasure Map, and kind of that was kind of the initial idea on some of these things. So yeah, again, I want to point out that we have just done an overhaul of all the back end of Treasure Map, and so it's going to be a little bit easier to maintain. It's going to be a little bit easier to add new features, and we're starting to think about how do we generalize some of these different ideas to do not just multi-messenger follow-up, but also time-domain follow-up in general. So what Heroic is based on is thinking about observatories. And this goes back to the days of the pandemic when Treasure Map did a really great job of, they just said, hey, what are your statuses? Are you open? Do you have staff going? Like, what's going on? And they actually just made a spreadsheet, put it on the website, and it turned out to be like one of the highest hit pages in the Treasure Map for quite a while, because this information just didn't exist anywhere else. But we want to take that and we want to move forward on it, and then make it more automated, easier to maintain, and we can then really build off that kind of idea. So it's really kind of amazing what you can do if you just know what telescopes are available and what instruments are available. So we've designed Heroic to be a one-stop shop to answer the question, what telescopes are available, what instruments are on telescopes. It's very similar to a cross in terms of goal, but we've kind of taken it from the opposite direction. We've taken it from the ground-based side, and we're NSF funded, where as a cross is NASA funded. So far we've been funded to build a prototype that includes both the Las Cumbres telescopes, so all of our instruments around the world, and Noir Lab telescopes. So these are where we're starting, and over time, we're going to start evolving these to include more and more. Eventually, kind of the goal of this is to say, I have a new kilonova. It's here's the RA in deck. What telescopes are available, and what can I use to observe this? As I said, it's very similar in across. They've kind of taken a space-based approach, and we're kind of converging towards the ground. So they're starting to think about things like Rubin. We're going kind of the opposite direction. Started with the ground-based Noir Lab telescopes, and now we're starting to think about things like Roman and some of the NASA missions. So they're very complementary. The idea will be we'll actually connect to their streams, and we'll query their databases and things like that for the space-based missions, and they'll do the same thing for things like what we've done on the ground with Noir Lab and Rubin, et cetera. All right, so you saw a version of this before. And I just want to say one more thing about HOP. The nice thing about HOP is that it is a hosted Kafka stream. So one of the daunting parts is if you've ever tried to set up a Kafka stream by yourself, it is not trivial to become a producer. It's not so bad if you just need to put a message onto an existing stream, but actually doing that initial setup is really non-trivial. HOP provides that structure. We host all of these streams. You can create topics, and those topics can contain any kind of information you want. The only information, or like the only format requirements, are the ones you set yourself. And so it can be a very powerful message sharing system. It's also, as Andy said, got authentication built into it. And so you can do private messages between different services, so you don't have to worry about just being open and sharing all of your things to the world. Though I think that's something we should discuss is, should we be more open than we have been in the past? So yeah, like I said, we're trying to come up with a better way than doing like this. Has anybody ever tried to say, hey, what instruments on CAC this week? Or what is Gemini doing? You've probably gone to a web page like this. Raise your hands. Anybody seen these pages before? It's all well and good if you know what telescope you're going to go to. But if the kilonova happens at 11 o'clock at night, you don't really want to be going to all these web pages one by one. You want to have some kind of central spot for it. So that's where Heroic comes in. This is now live on the page here. I'm on the dev server, but this is all on the production server as well. So if you go to heroic.cima.org, you can actually do any of this that you like. So this is the front page. It shows the telescopes that we have in the system. You can click on these things and you can see these different, each site has a certain number of telescopes. And so it kind of can explode each one of these. There's a variety of different things you can look at. You can look at just a plain list of the telescopes and instruments that are available. You can then pick your favorite, and you can see a little bit more information about any of them. But it's also, you can start to filter down by several other things. So for example, if you have a target that you're interested in, you can put a target name in here and it will automatically generate the coordinates if you happen to have something that's got a name cross match on it. And then it not only tells you what telescopes are available, but it tells you what telescopes can actually see that target. So in this particular case, I'm looking at telescopes in Chile because I'm looking at a southern target. I've chosen an LCO telescope, and if I click on it, I can see what does the schedule look like, whether that telescope is up, down, everything in between. And then I can build air mass plots, and I can look at visibilities, and I can answer the question in real time: when is my target visible? What instruments should I submit to? And like, who do I need to call, one of my friends or whatever, to try and get, if it's not a Q-based system, to try and get into their to get observations of this target. Now, this is already helpful if we're thinking in a reactive type of viewpoint. But what happens about if you wanted to plan and move and go the other direction? What if we want to plan ahead? So this is kind of back to Azali's question. I'm like, what if we had a place we could submit? I'm going to go observe this thing. And so this is something we're starting to integrate now, is that we're integrating pointings from different observatories into this system. So I choose a time period, and I go down here and I scroll over. This is a heat map. The brighter ones are where there are more observations. These are the Rubin observation. These are the Rubin pointings over the next week. It's actually only the next few days, which is all that Rubin publishes, but that's fine. But it gives you the opportunity to see where these different telescopes are going to point. But we've also set it up so that you can filter it by a specific point on the sky. Say you have a specific target and you say, when is Rubin going to observe a particular supernova? Or when in the past did Rubin observe this supernova, so that I can go look for precursor events, so I can look for variability beforehand, things like that. And so we also give you the ability to search which tiles are available from beforehand. And all this is well and good, but as I don't have to tell this crowd, I don't think, often it's better to do all of this via programmatically rather than having a human being try to click on all of these different things. So all of this can be done programmatically. If you simply add API to the URL, you can then get a list of these different APIs, and you can hit these programmatically through Python or whatever your library of choice is. So for example, when we pull in all of the different pointings for Rubin, if you were doing a shadow mission, like somebody in this room who may or may not have spoken this morning, you can pull all of these as they programmatically, and then you can start to plan things. You can also look for overlapping regions, whereas Ruben going to be pointing at the same time as Roman, and I'm going to point deck cam there 20 minutes later or something like that. And so you can start to do this across many, many different instruments. And because we pulled it into this kind of single location, this one-stop shop, you can then get all of that information from one place, make your observing plan. And what I'd encourage you to do is then push that information back up to us so that we can start to then broadcast that information to other people who are interested as well. And then, so as we've been building this, one of the things we've noticed is, I know Ruben is busy, but so that they do very kindly have an endpoint that gives where they're going to point. That doesn't appear to get updated with where they actually pointed. So we'd love to do that, but I think Dave is nodding in strong agreement over here. But I think it's something for all of the surveys, all of the observatories to understand is when we produce things like pointings, for example, it's if we can associate them with past plans and things like that, if we can use, say, a common ID between all of those, a lot of these can become a lot more powerful, and we can put them back together, kind of not only, we can go from end to end where it's like, okay, this is the pointing plan, this was when it was completed. And then in the long term, what we really want to do is we want to start pulling data. Once we have all of these different observations, say when we had selected the target with a certain number of fields, as we build up the number of instruments that are supported, we can also query their archives and say, get me the images for all of this patch of sky over the last N years. And we can start to build that up. So as you're designing that, I encourage you to try to think about, people are going to want to access your pointing information programmatically. And we'd love to figure out how to include your telescopes in all these. So any feedback you have would also be really helpful. So right now, yeah, we are in the process of adding more facilities. And then our next phase of development is, as I said, we're going to start thinking about pulling different data from different archives. Earlier as well, it was people were mentioning, well, how do you know all of the different APIs and why are we reinventing the wheel on how to access all these different archives? And so that's one of the services we're going to provide here. So I will leave it here. Thanks for your time and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Curtis. All right, time for questions. So Sebastian first.
Thanks. This seems really helpful. Specifically, I have a selfish request of, can we work together to implement something as complex as HET's pointing? Right? Because you have the pointing that's just coordinates, you can point, but HET is much more complicated than that.
Yeah, right, because they're fixed altitude telescope,
yes.
right?
Like solve problems.
Yeah, let's do it. It sounds great.
Because the current website to do that is not easy.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Griffin, please.
So yeah, this is really cool. I haven't seen this before, so I'm excited about it. In the distant future, when everybody's reporting their pointings to you, can you just automatically be the treasure map also, where you just know exactly who covered what part of any localization region at any time, and then you don't need people to even report to a second place anymore?
Yeah, that's one of the nice things about being built on a Kafka stream is actually kind of what I would like to see is that we'll have a single stream and that the treasure map will listen to it to pull individual pointings it needs for given objects. And then Heroic will pull from that as well to figure out exactly the question you're answering, like where did this observatory go? So hopefully there will only be one place where people have to submit. Yeah, absolutely.
Eric.
This is not something I'm directly responsible for, but I have some visibility, so I wanted to share it. Just a word of caution about the Rubin plan pointings. The Rubin scheduler is a fairly reactive, greedy sort of scheduler. And so it's not obvious to me that like the night plan or the 2-night plan is super informative. We certainly are very aware of both the need to show the observations that are completed, and we're trying to think about what the right way to sort of capture a little higher fidelity mode, like what is planned on maybe shorter timescales or something. But just wanted to give folks that sort of heads up.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are dynamically updating where the plans are coming from. So but right now, because they're not updating where they're completing, we're just basically blowing away all of the different Rubin pointings. And then as soon as we get new ones that you can do that. So hopefully your plans won't change dramatically like a couple hours before the night, but it may or may not happen that way.
Okay. Any additional questions? I'll just ask like a simple one. So if we're brand new to this and I want to use Heroic, how do you go about starting up? And yeah, it seems like there's a test suite that you were showing off right now. How does this work for users that are completely unfamiliar with getting started?
Yeah, so you can actually just go to heroic.summa.org. There is a login button at the top, and you can log in through actually your university credentials through CI logon. So that's nice. You don't have to come up with a new set of credentials. And then you can just start playing through. I mean, like I said, I think this has only been live for a day or two. And so that's why it was recorded on the dev, but it's actually all should just be live. You just go to the website and it should be there.
Awesome. I'm excited to try it out. Okay. Let's thank Curtis again.